real estate assets. Forget this. I have some of the greatest real estate assets in the world, and you know, I get along with everybody. You have to be able to do that if you're president, and you have to be able to get along with Congress. You know, Ronald Reagan did it. I mean, Tip O'Neill and him were total opposites, and yet him and Tip O'Neill were able to do great deals together.
Your impression of Rahm Emanuel and Bruce Browner?
Well, I don't know Bruce. I do respect Rahm. I gave him a contribution. Did you know that? I gave him a contribution because his brother is a great friend of mine, Ari, the king of Hollywood. I love Ari. And Ari asked me to give him a contribution. I don't know Rahm other than, you know, but I gave him a contribution. And, you know, when he first ran for mayor, at the request of his brother Ari, who actually represents me, but he's also a good friend. And I like Rahm very much. I really think you have to take care of your crime situation in Chicago. I will be honest. I mean, I think you have to take care of your crime situation. I'm not going to say that today in my speech because I don't want to be negative, but I think you have to take care. I'm talking to you as an outsider, but who has a big stake in Chicago. So maybe I can see it even better than you can. Because sometimes you have to be an outsider to see it. You have to take care of the crime situation in Chicago. It's all over the world, and Chicago is like the crime capital of the world. I read somebody said about a month ago, and it just stuck with me, that Chicago is more dangerous than Afghanistan. That's a hell of a quote. Now, I don't know if it is. I don't know. But when you look at, you know, all these kids being killed on a daily basis, and it hurts Chicago very badly.
What would you do about it?
Oh, you got to be very tough. What would I do about it? I'd be so tough.
I think the mayor probably feels he's tried everything.
I think you have to be tough. Yeah, got to be.
What does being tough consist of?
It means going in there and just you got to be tough, and you maybe have to go after, you know, stop and frisk stuff, which, by the way, it's going up in New York without the stop and frisk. You may have to go in there and be, you need tough cookies. These are tough kids. These are not babies. These are tough kids. If they saw you walking down the street, they wouldn't give a damn about you. You got to be tough. You can't be so gentle with these people. You got to stop crime. Crime in Chicago is out of control. And I will tell you, outside of Chicago, it's a huge negative and a huge talking point, and a huge negative for Chicago. You got to stop it. And the only way you're going to stop, you're not going to stop it by being nice. You got to stop it by being one tough son of a bitch.
Do you think there's something to the idea that, so there's violent crime rising in a number of cities, not just here, whether there's a Ferguson effect, that cops are reacting, that they're more concerned about getting into some sort of a legal issue? Are they sitting on their hands?
Well, I'm a big fan of the police because I think they've been horribly treated. And you always have bad cookies. I saw a couple of things, you know, I hated the shooting from the back. I mean, he ran away, but for that guy to stand there like it's target practice, I hope he's dealt with very severely. I hated the choking incident. I thought it was terrible on Staten Island. I thought that was absolutely outrageous. You know, and they said it wasn't choking. I thought that was terrible. Some of the others is, you know, Ferguson, I think the big problem with Ferguson, they didn't react quickly enough. You know, that first night was a disaster. That's when the damage took place. And the first night they not Ferguson, Baltimore, they burned down, you know, they burned down a big chunk of the city that took them 20 years. That drugstore took 15 years of economic development to get it built, and it was gone in one night in Baltimore. So, but, you know, you have great, I know the police, I'm a big fan of the police, but I think the police now are afraid to act. They're afraid to be tough. You know, when I was young, I was 18, 19, and I grew up in Brooklyn and Queens, and it was, you know, some of the areas were rough where my father and I had a business. My father he built houses and he built apartments in Brooklyn. And we would go to White Castle and have lunch, White Castle. And there were rough kids in there, you know, really rough kids. And my father and I would be having lunch in the White Castle, and we liked it because it was 12 cents a hamburger, I think, at that time, 11 cents. It was like, and they were very good. I don't know if they're even still around. It's a long way from Fifth Avenue, right? It's a long way from this. But we would go there every lunch, and you had rough, big, strong, powerful cops. And the gangs were there, and these cops would walk in there, and they had sticks in those days. And they'd break up those gangs, and those gang members were petrified of these guys. Petrified. Those guys would walk, and there was no crime. They were rough. But there was, I mean, you didn't have problems because they had total respect for the cops. And these guys would walk in, get the hell out of here, and they'd start, and these kids were scared stiff. And they were rough kids. Today, the kids, first of all, they don't have to say, I mean, you have some rough cops, but the cops aren't so rough today, to put it mildly, okay? But today, the kids are shouting at the cops and, you know, calling them all sorts of names and laughing at them and like it's a joke. Different world. But I'll tell you what, when I was young, it really had an impression. These guys would walk in and you'd have no problem. You could sit there and you could eat.
What year are we talking about?
Well, I was 18 years old, 19 years old, Brooklyn. So we're talking
You were
about
born what year?
1946.
So we're talking about mid-60s?
Yeah, mid-60s. Mid-60s, 64, 65. But we used to go at least 3 times a week, we'd go to White Castle in Brooklyn. And it was a pretty rough area, but you had a lot of rough kids. But those kids had total fear of the cops. Today, if cops ever did that, they'd have them arrested and given the electric chair. They didn't do wrong, they were just forceful. They were strong people. And today, it's not even politically correct to say that. And I am a big fan, and I know you have a couple of percentage bad, and you're going to have that in any business. You have that in your newspaper business, you have it in everything. But, you know, you're going to have to be rough with these kids in Chicago, because I'm telling you, the reputation of Chicago is getting battered badly. Yes?
Yeah, this is a little bit more of almost a personality question, I guess. You have, between the show, just your being known in the casinos,
Right.
you know, just over time, being well known in the books, your Twitter feed, you have a public persona. It's
Right.
almost, and I think it's almost becomes, you may not agree with this, but it almost becomes a character.